Welcome to the Real Estate Niche Show, a show that focuses on top real estate professionals who specialize in different niches of real estate. My name is Ben Kogut. Join me as we dive deep into the professional and personal lives of the experts of the real estate industry. Welcome to the Real Estate Niche Show. I'm your host, Ben Kogut. Today, I am super honored to have John Casmon on the show today. He is a real estate entrepreneur who has partnered with busy professionals to invest in over $100 million worth of apartments. John also consults active multifamily investors to help them start or grow their businesses. He hosts the Target Market Multifamily Insights podcast, which is got over 350 episodes, and he's the co-creator of the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit. John, thank you so much for being here. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to your background here?
No, man, there's enough in that. But the one thing is we actually just rebranded our podcast to be Multifamily Insights. So that's the show. If you're looking for that, it's Multifamily Insights podcast. And Ben, I'm excited to be here today. You know, you've got a fun show here with a nice topic talking about the different real estate niches. And I'm excited to talk about what we're working on.
Yeah, thanks. Well, let's dive into it. What are you working on?
Well, we do, multifamily syndication, to keep this thing really easy. It's just group investing, right? So if you think about a group of people who are thinking about investing in real estate, maybe in the past, you might take 100K, I might take 50K, somebody else would take their 50K. But let's say you got 10 people with 50K, right? Individually, they can go out there and buy maybe a property worth around $200,000. Maybe you stretch it up to get about $250,000 worth of a property. Well, instead of doing that, everybody managing their own property and dealing with every single headache that comes with being a property manager or a landlord, all 10 of us put our money together and we go out and buy a property that's worth $2.5 million or $2 million. Now we've got $500,000 that we can go out and acquire a property. So it's really just working as a group where now a portion of the group is going to be the general partners or the active teams. We're going to manage the deal, oversee everything from hiring vendors, managing the day-to-day operations, overseeing the asset, and the rest of the investors really just collect the cash flow, right? So that's what we do. It's multifamily syndication. I know you do a lot of this, raising capital for deals. It doesn't have to be just for multifamily, but for us, we like multifamily and apartments because people are pretty familiar with apartments. You see apartments everywhere when you go in your day-to-day, and apartments are growing. We have a housing crisis in this country where we're just not building enough houses for Americans. And apartments are a way to continue to provide that value to most people. And it's a great way to profit as well. So we love the fact that there's so much availability of multifamily. It's a very resilient asset class, meaning that when we have these recessions or we have different crazy things that take place, typically, if you've got a 100-unit apartment complex, it doesn't have to be this big, by the way, but if you have a 100-unit apartment complex, most of those people are still going to be able to pay rent. 85, 90, 95% of those people are still going to be able to pay their rent. So we're not as susceptible to market changes and things that may impact either the residential market or some of the other asset classes.
Can you talk a little bit about how you're able to find deals in today's market?
Yeah, man, the market's crazy, right? It's a hot, crazy market. And I think there are two different ways to think about it. There are the people who say the market's too hot. I'm sitting on the sidelines. Many of those people have been on the sidelines for the last 5 years, right? It's been going up for really since 2012 or 2013. And people have said the market was overheated back then. So part of this is understanding that over the long haul, it's more likely than not that the market will go up, right? When you look at inflation, when you look at the cost of living, when you look at the cost of rent, housing, those things are going up. So it's likely that the values for these homes, for these properties is going to go up as well. So we're looking at it with more of a long tail view in mind. If we can take advantage of opportunities in the short and midterm, we will. And we're certainly looking for those opportunities, but we want to make sure that we're protected and have more of a long view and not just trying to focus on something we could get in and flip in 12 months. So I think it's still a great time to buy. You've got to find deals. It's harder to find deals. And a great insight that I could share with your audience right now is the folks who are doing deals today who are being successful at it, they're creating deals. It's not so much grabbing numbers off of a spreadsheet, throwing them, or grabbing numbers from a broker, throwing them into a spreadsheet and hoping it works out. Sometimes you've got to find opportunities, and you're going to have to work a little bit harder. You're going to have to see more deals. You're going to have to analyze more deals. You're going to have to really understand what's happening at a property. But if you can do that, build some strong relationships, you can uncover an opportunity where you could create a deal that maybe isn't there for other investors.
Nice. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Do you mean like going in there and doing renovations, or like, what do you mean by creating a deal?
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to have a business plan. If you're going to go out and buy these properties, you have to have a plan of what you're going to do to create value. So a lot of people don't realize this, but when you invest in commercial real estate, particularly multifamilies, you are buying a business. This business has an operating agreement, right? You've got a T12 statement, income statement, you've got a rent roll. So you have the business performance that you're evaluating. And when you buy it, you should be buying it with the intention of how do you help it create more value? That needs to be about the market conditions. It needs to be about demand. It needs to be about the finishes. All of those different things. How else can you create value? Are there other amenities you can add? Are there other things that you can do to this property to maybe reposition it? Maybe instead of renting it to the current resident base, what if you could attract a different resident base, right? So those are the things that I'm talking about when I say creating value. You have to have a sense of what you can do to that property and how is it best used to create that value.
Got it. Very nice. And let's kind of come full circle. You talked about bringing a bunch of individuals together. So can you talk a little bit about how you've been able to attract those investors and raise capital?
Yeah, it's interesting. I spent 15 years in corporate America doing marketing and advertising for big brands and influencers. And I never saw multifamily as that same business. I didn't think the marketing and advertising kind of worked the same way, but in a lot of ways it does. And that work that I was doing before, it's transferable when you think about real estate investing. So when we talk about how we're finding deals or how we're finding investors, it really starts with a personal brand. And whether you are actively creating messages to create your personal brand, or you just are being yourself, you have a personal brand, because a brand is not about what you're saying. It's not the messages you're doing. It's not about your advertising. A brand is how other people perceive you. So if they see you as someone who is doing deals, that's what they're going to know you for. Like we were talking before, Ben, right? So you're big really right now into syndicating more commercial deals, triple net lease type opportunities. So that's how you're crafting your brand. If that's the only thing I knew about you, if someone were to approach me and say, hey, I'm looking to invest passively in a triple net lease deal, do you know anybody? You know what? Ben Kogut. That's a brand. A brand is when you come to mind when someone is looking for a service that you offer, something that you have, without you being present in the room, right? If you're in the room, you can talk for yourself. But when you're not in that room, your brand is what carries you forward. So that's what we're talking about. You have to have a personal brand where people are seeing you as the kind of person they want to do business with. They have to know you're in real estate. If they don't know you're in real estate, how are they going to know they can work with you or partner with you? So that was one of the things we had to do starting out, was really get our name out there, let people know that this is what we do. And it was kind of scary at first, because at first I was working a day job. I had my W-2 in advertising, and I didn't want them to feel like I was being distracted at work or anything like that. But the reality is I had to find a way to get the word out there, or I was not going to grow this other business. And luckily for me, I was in an environment that was very entrepreneurial, and it supported people having side projects and other interests. So I was able to highlight that a little bit more. And when I launched my podcast, there weren't a whole lot of people doing podcasts, at least people I knew. Now, you probably find a bunch of people doing podcasts on anything. But back then, you didn't have that many people doing podcasts. So the fact that I did a podcast was actually interesting to a lot of people. And they wanted to know, hey, how'd you do the podcast? What does it look like? How do you publish it? So I would get a lot of questions even from that standpoint. So that goes to say, not only was I establishing myself as a real estate investor and as a multifamily syndicator, but as a podcaster, as a marketer, all these other things. So it kind of worked together to establish, the brand that I was trying to build. But I think the first thing you got to do is build a personal brand and then craft that message. If you want people to see you in a certain light, shine the light on that aspect of what you're doing so people can actually see that.
Love that. I love that. And so I'm assuming that your podcast was part of that strategy of building your brand. and you have over 350 episodes by now. Over what period of time? How long ago did you start your podcast?
Yeah, over 4 years ago.
Wow. And maybe any tips for a new guy like myself for as I get this Real Estate Niche Show up and running?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, man, when I launched my podcast, I really launched it with a lot of clarity. The problem that I had was I didn't have the end game in mind holistically. So the show was launched as Target Market Insights, and it was geared towards helping people find the best places to invest. And the reason I launched that show was because I was trying to figure out how to find the best places to invest. I had made all of my deals in Chicago at that point. I knew that I needed to grow and expand outside of the Chicago market. And even in Chicago, I was having a hard time investing in the markets that I'd come to love. Prices had gone up, as we talked about before. So those deals that I could find, in the neighborhoods I really love, the numbers no longer penciled. So my options were either stretch or accept less in return, or try to find different neighborhoods to invest in. So I kept changing neighborhoods and expanding my geographic investing base. And ultimately, it just got to the point where I couldn't find the kind of deals I wanted to do in Chicago. And as I wanted to start working with other investors, now I needed to give a good chunk of profits to those investors as well. So I really needed to find deals or markets where there was more cash flow than I was finding in my backyard. So that's where I started with the show, talking to other people. What are you looking at when you look at a market? Because I couldn't figure it out. I would talk to investors who were in Texas or Florida or somewhere else, and the stuff they were doing just didn't work in my markets. In Chicago, north side of Chicago, our price per unit was like 140, 150,000 for a C-class type property. So talking to people who are buying properties for 50, 60K a door, the numbers didn't add up. The 1% rule, 2% rule, none of that stuff added up for what we were doing in Chicago. So I just realized, what? There's got to be a different way. And as you started looking at more cash flow markets, now you got the complete flip side of that, where there's maybe less appreciation potential. So you don't want to buy something that has good cash flow, but has no potential to actually increase in value. So I wanted to learn more about that. So I say that to say, from a podcast standpoint, I was really clear on what I wanted to achieve. I achieved that, learned how to find the best places to invest, check. The problem is I didn't really have the plan B. And the other thing that I wanted the podcast to do was help me expand and connect with other potential investors. And while interviewing those investors was helpful, I think if I could go back, one thing I would have done differently is made sure I created a podcast that was geared towards the type of person I wanted to connect with. And this is kind of a marketing trick that I'll give you. It's not really a trick. It's marketing 101, really. But you have to have your customer in mind. We call it an avatar. But who are you talking to? Who are you trying to reach? Who are you trying to help? How do you add value to that individual? So if you go back to my marketing days, it didn't matter if I was working on Mountain Dew, Nike, Coors Light, General Motors. The first thing we had to figure out was, who is this product for? Who wants this? What problem are we solving? Do we actually solve that problem, or do we need to go back to the drawing board? And how do we understand when they're looking to use this product? And it's the same kind of thing with the podcast. Who are you trying to help? What kind of information do you hope they can get from your show? And how do you ensure that you actually deliver and pay off that promise? If you can do that, I think you have a great show.
All right. Well, that's the plan. That's the direction we're headed, to educate sophisticated investors about a bunch of different real estate niches and some of the best people at the top of their game within those niches. So that's definitely great to hear. And hopefully all the listeners, all you guys out there will also be interested in learning about what John has to offer, and vice versa. John's people will eventually get to learn about the triple net syndication stuff that we do as well. And so that's kind of what I have in the back of my head. And so the next question I'll throw at you is, what's been the number one contributor to your success on this journey so far?
I think trying to add value to other people, even if it doesn't pay off for me directly or right away. If you could focus on helping other people and you can help enough other people get what they're looking for, it tends to come back around and help you. So I'll give you a quick example.
Sure.
We put together something on our website. It's a sample deal package. And all it is, I took a couple of deals I was looking at and put it together as if it were a deal we were going to pursue, and put together that package and put it up on our website. And part of the reason we did this was, I think for active investors, so those people who want to, do what Ben and I are doing and lead their own deals and present this to other investors, they didn't really know what to include. A lot of stuff I was seeing was either a one page Word document, or just some numbers on a deal, or somebody would just shoot you an email and ask you to invest. I'm like, what is this? The presentation was not there. It's not professional. It's not clear. And I wanted people to understand, like, hey, there's a story you need to tell, right? You've got to include certain information in a deal before you can get to the numbers. You got to tell me a little bit more about the team, the market, the property, all these things, right? So we put together a sample deal package to help those people. The other thing is, for a passive investor, if you are a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, or you've done single family investments, and this is really your first time getting into commercial or passive investing, some of these terms may not be familiar. Some of the logic, the communication, a lot of this stuff goes over people's heads. I mean, it's pretty complex stuff, right? I mean, even us just talking about triple net lease syndication, like, that's a lot of stuff that, is jargon that you and I probably got real familiar with. But for someone who's, is a full-time medical doctor or whatever, they're probably like, do what? So we wanted to put this sample deal together so you could look at a deal, really get a sense of the kind of things that are in here, the kind of things to look for, so that you could get familiar with terms, you could get familiar with the deal structure, what an 8% preferred return rate means and looks like, and how that impacts a deal, all that kind of stuff. So we put that together on our website. If anybody wants to check that out, you can go to casmoncapital.com/sample deal. But we put that together to help other people. We've had a lot of people reach out and say, hey, appreciate you sharing this information. This is very helpful. We do send a follow-up email that gives you 7 questions to ask before investing in a deal. So that's really helpful for a lot of people as well. And we just try to help other people. And in turn, typically, we build some relationships over that. And, a lot of those folks will consider investing with us as we move forward. But it starts with being willing to give. And I'll tell you the reason this is important is I was kind of hesitant at first, because I spent a lot of time putting my deal packages together, and I didn't want to just put it out there. Someone else could steal it and just take it and run with it. But you have to be willing to be somewhat vulnerable if you want to grow. You got to help people. And you have to realize that if you are truly there to help people, you're going to get it back from the people who are willing to work with you and compensate you for that help. There's always going to be people who are going to take your ideas or take the information you have and run with it, right? But, you have to have an abundance mindset. And for me, there's nothing I could put in a document or a piece of paper that somebody could take from me, and that's going to be enough for them to elevate beyond what I could do, right? I'm constantly pouring into myself and the education, my connections. And I mean, we can go toe for toe for hours if necessary. But I'm pretty confident in the work we do, the efforts that we put into it. And I'm not worried about someone else taking advantage of some of the work that I've already put in.
Nice. Well, we'll get to that mindset conversation here in a second. And we're going to start pivoting towards some of those questions that I planted in your ear a second ago before we started chatting, which was, what was the first and or the worst job that you've ever had?
Man. So the very first job I ever had, I was 13 years old. I got a worker permit, and I was working for a medical records company, and I pulled medical records in a warehouse. So some of you are a little bit younger and may not realize this, but back in the day, we all had medical charts. They were physical charts that were stored in a warehouse. So if somebody got sick and was rushed to the hospital called and say, hey, I need a chart for John Smith. And the hospital or whoever would have to go and find John Smith's chart, especially if it wasn't the same hospital. And I worked in a warehouse where I actually pulled those charts, and we would, pull John Smith's medical chart. I put it in a big box, and it would get sent out, by courier to that hospital or to the doctor's office every day. So I did that for a couple years. It was fun. I mean, listen, it's the most mundane, boring thing because it's just numbers and letters. And you just say, go, because I didn't know people's names. I didn't say John Smith. I would just get pull file, OH, CR1234, right? So I'd have my list of files to pull. I'd go into the big warehouse, go up and down the aisles. And we had ladders, but sometimes I would just climb up on the shelf, completely unsafe stuff. And I'm 13 years old, right? So I would climb up there, grab the chart. I didn't feel like grabbing the ladder if I left in the other aisle. But I did that for a couple of summers. And, I had to organize them too. So I had to, spend hours organizing all the charts. It was a lot of work, man, a lot of grunt work. Not a whole lot of fun, but I found a way to entertain myself.
I love to ask that question just because get all sorts of answers, and it's just really inspiring and humbling to see how far along people come along their journeys, and frankly, how much further we all have to go. And so, kind of to that point, actually, let's fast forward to the next question that I love to ask people, which is, how do you invest in yourself?
I'm always trying to invest in myself. I mean, part of that is just self-care, right? You have to be mindful of where you're at. I try to take some time in the morning, every morning, and just sit and think. I used to try to meditate, but I find my mind just starts to wander. So you can call it meditation or just thinking, whatever. I'll just sit there for about 5 minutes, just let my mind go wherever it wants to go and try to think through some things and then start my day. And I normally started writing. So I normally start my day waking up, think for a little bit, say a prayer, come downstairs, get to my office, write for about a half hour or so. And it normally puts me in a pretty good mood. So I try to start my day by just allow myself to have a little bit of clarity in the morning.
I'm curious, what do you like to write about?
Oh, it's always social media posts, podcast, blog posts, newsletter stuff. And then sometimes it's just, semi-journaling, where again, it's just more just random thoughts that are in my head, things that I'm thinking about, people in my life that I'm grateful for, stuff like that.
And how do you like to invest in the community?
One of the things that I love to do is I'm on the board for an organization called Search for Water. And I love being a part of this organization because water and clean drinking water is something I think many of us take for granted. You go to your faucet. I mean, worst case scenario, you go to your faucet, turn it on. Some of us are probably at a point where it's like, if it's not filtered water, I'm not going to drink it. Right. And the point is, we've got clean running water through our house everywhere we go. And there are countries where that is simply not the case. And children are missing school because they have to go fetch water from a local well. And that local well is maybe 4 or 5 miles down the street, right? So it's incredible when you think of where we're at as a society and the level of privilege all of us have. And really just recognizing that. And a friend of mine, she launched this organization about 11 or 12 years ago. She was actually a friend of my wife's, worked with my wife. And I remember she told me she was going to leave her full-time consulting W-2 job, really nice paying job, to run this nonprofit full-time. And I just volunteered to say, listen, if there's anything I could do to help you, especially from a marketing standpoint, please let me know. And I've pretty much been on the board ever since then. And we're excited. We've got, a lot of great initiatives coming up, but all the proceeds go to the field work. So if you were to donate, you could donate $250 and that will go towards a well. We actually help reestablish bathrooms. Some of these schools don't have bathrooms. So we actually built the bathrooms and things like that. So it's just great to see the work directly into the field. And I know people donate to Red Cross and, United Way and so many other great organizations. The big difference here is that because this is a smaller organization, like I said, all the money goes to the field. So we're not funding, the overhead and people's salaries and everything like that. The money goes directly into the field for every donation that's made by a person. So, for anyone who wants to see their money stretch a little further and actually make an impact on someone's life, you can check out searchforwater.org and learn more about the organization.
All right, searchforwater.org. We'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thanks for all that you're doing for the world. That's really a wonderful cause. pivoting to the next question, which is, how do you define the word success?
Success is about control. If you can control your life, you can control where you're at, where who you're with, when you get to leave or where you get to be and when you get to be there. That's success. For me, my personal definition, to take that another step forward, I always wanted to be able to either coach or attend my children's activities. That may seem really simple for a lot of people, but to give you context, my parents both worked really hard. My dad worked third shift. Sometimes he worked first or second shift. It just depended, but missed almost all of my things. My mom worked really hard as well. So when I was doing activities as a kid, like they just weren't there. It just wasn't really an option for them to be there. And it didn't really bother me because I knew they were working hard for us. But as I got into adulthood and really got into my career, and I saw a lot of my colleagues who were also missing their children's activities because they had to work harder. They had to work late at night in the office. It made me just think about what we value as a society. In particular, there was one person who really hesitated to even. I think there was someone who asked her a question about how she balances, work and home life, and she really hesitated to try to figure out how old her kids were. She was like, yeah, well, my kids are 8, 7. And it just made us sit there and like, and don't get me wrong, she was a high up executive. And I think that there's a lot of pressure, obviously, for women in particular, something my wife and I always talk about too. But it's something that you have to be mindful of. And for me, I remember I was on a shoot and I couldn't get out of the shoot when I was back in marketing. And my youngest son, or my oldest son, it was his birthday. I was going to make the party and all that stuff. But the day of like his actual birthday, I had to be in another state for a shoot and I couldn't get out of it. And I just remember at that moment, I was like, hey, man, your priorities don't match what you say your priorities are. So you can make all the excuses you want, right? You can justify it in your head. You're doing it for the family. This is work. I can't control it. Man, we always have a choice. And at that moment, I chose to go do the job thing. And I said at that moment, never again. So part of what we do with this syndication business, yes, we want to help people make returns. Yes, we want to help people grow their portfolio and build wealth. But the reason behind all of that is so that they have more control over the things that really matter in their lives. If you had an additional stream of income, if you had some generational wealth, it empowers you to make different choices. So that's the real goal of all of this, is to put people in a position to take control of their future.
I 100% agree. And I have conversations with investors on a regular basis about, building enough passive income to give them the control and the freedoms that they want in their life. And I think that's a wonderful definition of success for things. So thank you for sharing that. So anyways, we're winding down a little bit. John, would you mind sharing with people how they might be able to reach out to you if they wanted to?
Yeah, absolutely. The best thing is check out that sample deal. You'll learn and get something out of it. It's a very valuable thing. So go to casmoncapital.com/sample deal. And you mentioned the podcast. Check that out as well. Multifamily Insights, anywhere you listen to shows.
Multifamily Insights. Excellent. Looking forward to checking that out. And so on that note, is there anything else that you'd like to share?
Not really. You know what? Listen, just be smart, be safe, and take advantage of these great information you're getting. One thing with us as podcasters, sometimes we don't know the value people get out of the shows. And, Ben, you're kind of early into it at this point. I've been in it for a while. Listen, give us feedback. Leave us a rating and review on the show. Send us an email, but let someone know, hey, man, I appreciate you doing that episode, or I really like that guest you had on. It helps us just to know that, hey, there's people listening. I used to do radio in college at a radio show. And there were times where you felt like you were like a real radio star. And there were times when you felt like, is anybody listening to this? Like, if I literally just like walked away and let it go radio silence, would anyone know? Would anyone care? So that's the downside of this, is like, it's not like you're doing a webinar or something live where it's streaming and you can see all the viewers or anything like that, right? So you just have no idea. So sometimes it's just helpful to hear back from people, especially starting out, if you don't have a huge audience just yet. But just let us know that you enjoy the podcast and getting good value out of the show, and take action with the information you're hearing.
On that note, thank you for those wise words, and thanks everybody for listening to the Real Estate Niche Show. I really would appreciate it if you could like and share this with other people so we can get some more fantastic guests like John on the show and keep growing it and learning and making this journey. It's going to be fun. So on that note, that's it. That's all I got for you guys today. John, thanks again. And
thanks for having me, Ben.
My pleasure. All right, guys. Have a great day. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Real Estate Niche Show. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me or the show, you can follow me on Instagram at Ben Kogut and at the Real Estate Niche Show. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.